Welcome, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us for this special podcast at Usada, where we are covering the wisdom teachers who come in and share at Usada.
Thanks for having me.
Michael, our topic today is of huge interest to our listeners and also globally. It's one of the most practical ways to improve the quality of life. You've been an Ayurveda expert forever. You also
Not true. Not for long.
okay.
No, and I don't think there are any Ayurvedic experts. Only
Sure.
students, in
How
my
beautiful.
opinion.
How
Yeah.
beautiful. I love that. And also, you teach a lot of Buddhism and meditation. So, I just want you to share with our listeners your backstory.
So I actually got into Ayurveda late in life. So I was actually for probably about 20 years. I lived in New York City and Los Angeles, and I was really trying to make it as a writer.
Wow.
So I wrote a few novels, but luckily, my good fortune is that I was never successful being a writer.
You're too humble.
So it was one of the best things to ever happen to me was that at 40 years old, I decided to just change tracks.
Wow.
And over the years, I started to get really interested in natural health. I was really into the biohacking thing. I have been a meditator for about 20 years. I spent a year in India of my life. And so Ayurveda was just like a very natural fit. So I was lucky enough to have really good teachers, and I went to a school in California.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned early on is that, per my earlier point, is that, several incarnations and several lifetimes aren't enough to really get to the bottom of Ayurveda. It is just like, there's a quote I really love. It says, "The larger the searchlight, the larger the circumference of the unknown." Meaning that the more that I learn about Ayurveda, the more that I see I have to learn, or that there is to learn. So it's a very humbling, and also it's also like a deep honor to practice in the tradition, but it's also very humbling because will always be more that I don't know than what I do.
Thank you, Michael. I just learned now that you were a writer. I was a writer myself. I was an art copywriter.
Okay.
And I shifted to yoga med. So we have something in common.
All right.
I liked what you said, and I want you to just go a little deeper, because for a lot of our listeners, they may feel that Ayurveda is just a question of them getting their food right, or just some therapy that they do. Like you rightly said, it's a lifelong and multiple lifetime study. If you can just throw some light on the basics, the essence, and whatever it is that you would like our listeners to take away.
So Ayurveda to me is it's mind, body, soul, and spirit. So it is holistic through and through. And the diet and food is a big part of that. Do I look at you or the camera? What do you think is better?
Yeah, it's fine.
So the diet is a big part of that. But even in the diet, it just unfolds to so many different dimensions. Because it's in Ayurveda, it's not only what you eat, it's why you eat, it's when you eat, it's how you eat, it's food combinations, right? It's how you feel when you eat. Yeah. All of this will affect your immune system. It will affect your digestion, which in turn will affect almost everything according to Ayurveda. So it is not just food. Food is one small part of that, but even in that one small part, there are so many variables to contend with.
Sure.
But Ayurveda, it's a mind, body, soul, and spirit. And of course, there are so many different modalities in each one of those categories. But one of the most important things to really get across to people, and this was the biggest eye-opener for me when I was studying Ayurveda, is that everybody's different.
Yeah.
It's just like what works for you may not work for me. And what works for me today, next week, may not work for me. So it's always different, we're always different, and we're always changing. So this is why kind of Ayurveda is like, I think at least in the beginning, a lot of people, they can't quite get a handle on it.
Yeah.
It's like a rock climbing wall, but with no divots, no crevices.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like, I don't understand. And it's because everything is different for every person. And it will always be changing too.
True, true.
So, but there are, in all of this change, certain principles that are universal that everybody can use and apply.
Sure thing. And could you also throw some light in terms of the basic constitutions? That everybody has some idea of a dosha and so on and so forth. But it'd be great if you could sort of elaborate a little bit.
Sure. So the doshas, it's like that's really the first thing when everybody learns Ayurveda. The question is always, well, what dosha am I? Yeah. And the dosha is important. It's really an important part for you to consider as you go about your life. But really, as what you're going to be accounting for most of the time is not necessarily your dosha, but it is your imbalance in the moment.
Sure.
So if you're excessively hot, you always want to bring in coolness. If you're damp, you want to bring in dryness, et cetera, et cetera. So your dosha is like a great entry point and a great starter, but it really is about, and this is something I didn't quite get in the beginning, because in the beginning when I was learning Ayurveda, it was like almost too simple. Sure. You know, it's like, okay, space, air, fire, earth, water. Okay, how does this affect my life? How is this useful to me? Yeah. But all of the three dosas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, are made up of two elements. Yeah. And once you understand the qualities of these elements, so like Vata, for example, is air and space. Yeah. So then this is mostly dry and cold and rough and mobile. So Vata people, they tend to move a lot. They don't like to sit in one place, right? And they tend to have dry skin, prone to constipation. Yeah. So once you understand these sort of basic principles, then you can kind of start adapting your life to fit and always reduce and balance that Vata, which is the most likely to go out of balance. Mm-hmm. But for every dosha, you can be imbalanced, and it doesn't matter what dosha you are, you can be imbalanced in any one of the three.
Perfect. Yeah. That sounds amazing. And so one of the questions that we always sort of asked is, if you're born with a particular dosha, and most people would be a couple, some of them are equally balanced, but so would it be right to say that, say, I'm a Vata Pitta? Me staying as Vata Pitta is health, or some schools have the notion that complete balance of all three is health. So how do you see this from your personal perspective?
That's a good question. I think it's, there are, like, just like Western medicine and Ayurveda and the literature, it's like, even the ancient textbooks, they don't always agree with each other. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's like, every morning I read the Charaka Samhita, which is one of the ancient textbooks, and it's taken me about 4 years, and I'm at book 7, which is the final book. But even in the commentary in that book, they will say, okay, well, Sushruta, the next textbook, doesn't agree with, they say something else. Yeah. So there's a saying in Charaka that health, or swasthya, being settled in yourself, so mind, body, soul, and spirit, it's the balance of the doshas, the dhatus, the malas, So it is essentially less about the doshas than being sort of holistically balanced. Mm-hmm. But to get to your point, it's if you are a Vata Pitta or a Pitta Vata, then your Kapha more or less is typically the least likely to go out of balance. Yeah. So this will, in a sense, for most of the time, kind of take care of itself. Yeah. So it's more of the Vata and Pitta you always want to look at as like a mixing board in a sound studio. Sure. You kind of always going to want to start adjusting the levers.
Sure. An interesting point that you raised is from the Charaka Samhita, and things change as more research happens in the Sushruta Samhita, and we are saying that the golden time for Ayurveda is about 1000 BCE to about 300 or 400 CE. Where does that research continue in the modern context, right? So, to a large extent, biohacking, since you mentioned it, took up the mantle in a very different way to optimize body-mind. But where does that research continue in today's world? And how are you finding that? What are the other things that you're having to research to stay relevant in terms of what the texts say and what today problems are?
That's a good question. And as far as the research goes, I don't know. I have no idea.
Good.
And but we're in a big problem because it's like there's not exactly like an ashwagandha lobby out there that's going to pay millions of dollars for a randomized controlled trial to study the herb.
Yeah.
So who would fund the herbal studies? So it's like there's plenty of case reports and there's plenty of small studies, but this is part of the reason why it's a little bit frustrating in a very data-driven world where people want data and they want studies to show that the Ayurvedic, the dinacharyas or the lifestyle, the herbs, but there isn't much out there as far as case studies because there's really no funding for it.
Sure.
So, but there is thousands of years of evidence,
Sure.
which it's like a science. They have to, the thesis, and they have to replicate the results. And Ayurveda is just replicated thousands and thousands of years.
Yes.
For me, that's plenty of evidence.
That's data.
But in the Western world, it's typically not enough.
Sure.
But what's very interesting is that, and this is something I kind of loosely track in the news, is that like Western medicine is now giving themselves Nobel Prizes for stuff that they're, quote unquote, discovering, but have been Ayurvedic principles for thousands of years. Like the gut microbiome. This is only in the past maybe 20 years. It's become so popular, but Ayurveda, the notion of Agni and how it's such a primary influence on your health, and then also circadian rhythms. This is a Nobel Prize, I think 2017, through studying fruit flies, not even human beings. That and again, Ayurveda, it's circadian rhythms. It's aligning the microcosm with the macrocosm of the planet.
Absolutely.
So. And I used to sort of kind of, make fun of Western medicine for giving themselves big prizes for things that they discovered, which they didn't really discover.
Yeah.
But it's to me, it's become a little bit more fascinating that humanity, they're kind of arriving at these truths independently.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just using different measurements and different cultures and different stuff like that. But it's really fascinating that they're stumbling upon the same things that Ayurveda has been talking about for thousands of years.
Absolutely.
So, and there's just there's so many more examples of this.
For sure.
But in a sense, it's just to get back to your question, it's almost like Western medicine is through the back door replicating and doing the research, although they're not calling it Ayurveda.
Yes.
And they lose their funding if they call it Ayurveda.
Yes.
But it's really, really, really similar.
True.
And what's also fascinating, if I'm just going on a tangent, feel free to stop me, but into the whole biohacking stuff like that, as I progress in my Ayurvedic journey, as I get older, as I study more, I'm into that stuff less and less.
Got it.
Because it's just it's like happening so fast, where a new supplement will come out. And then 2 years later, the research is invalidated.
Generational research.
Right. And what's also really important to keep in mind is that, I can take it here, is that all the biohacking stuff, thank you, all of the biohacking stuff, which is really interesting, and I can't really take credit for this insight. My friend, years ago, I was at the biohacking conference in Los Angeles, and I was there with a friend, and he came out of the conference hall with like all the tech, all these $80,000 toys and everything. And he's got this like wild look on his face, and I'm like, "What's going on in there? What happened?" He's like, "I just realized that every device in there is just replicating what we used to get from nature."
How true, whether it's sunlight or
whether it's light, whether it's sound, whether it's frequency, whether it's smell. And it's just so true. We used to get all of these things from nature.
You're so right, because since you mentioned the World Biohack Conference, I was speaking at the World Biohack Summit in Dubai about 2, 3 years ago, and I made a presentation that yogis were the original biohackers. And of course, that means that their knowledge of yoga with Ayurveda was allowing them to biohack. So
Yeah.
happy to see that synergy.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, and that was a big, understanding that was very important. It's like to regulate your nervous system, you can actually just stand barefoot on the earth.
Yeah, yeah. How beautiful.
Or, to boost your hormones or
Yeah.
your bone structure, you can get sunlight at solar noon. And
True.
it's just really mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is. It is.
But we're just going deeper and deeper down the tech rabbit hole for
Yes.
better or worse.
Michael, I'm going to ask you to share one tool. You brought in the idea of certain herbs, you mentioned certain herbs. One tool that may not be a herbal remedy, any remedy that you feel our listeners can benefit in their day-to-day life, something they can do to improve quality of life. You can choose whether it's digestion or sleep or whatever you wish to.
Yeah. There's so many things.
I know.
So many things. But sleep obviously is very important. But one of the most obvious things that I tell all my clients and all my workshops is that, since digestion is a big issue these days,
Yeah.
the first question I always ask people is whether they chew their food or not.
Wow.
So this is something, and this is part of the reason why I fell in love with Ayurveda, is that it is often the simplest things that can go the furthest for people.
It changed so much.
So I had a few years ago, I had a client that really changed my outlook. He was like, he had digestive disorders for over a decade. He had gone to gastroenterologists, and they told him he had IBS. And IBS basically means we don't know, there's something wrong with you, but we're not quite sure what it is. And he was very high pitta, very active, surfing, hiking, running, and he was also doing intermittent fasting every day. So when it was time for him to eat, he said he inhaled his food. And at the end of the session, I didn't want to recommend any herbs or anything because he was a very healthy guy, but I said, I don't think you're chewing your food. And 2 weeks later, and I felt funny about saying that because he was, paying me as a consultant. I was like, oh, chew your food, it just didn't, but it felt right. 2 weeks later, I get an email from him that's all capital letters saying that he's 80% improved.
Wow.
Just from putting his fork down when he takes a bite and not picking it up again until he has thoroughly chewed his previous bite. And since then, I've seen several clients where 20 years of constipation, 10 years of constipation, or digestive distress was alleviated just from drinking ginger tea and from chewing your food. That's it.
Wow. I hope that helps, and I'm sure it does. Michael, I had one more. I know that you're very passionate about, we were talking about it, and you just wrote recently about social media, phone addiction. And they're taking ancient wisdom to a new age problem. The human condition has not changed so much for about 2 millennia. It's changing a lot now with the fact that we don't have any time to just sit or to be bored even, because we're constantly inundated. Just if you could share some insights from the problems that we face with social media or phone addiction, and how Ayurveda, Buddhist meditation, anything that you feel your way to handle that.
It's fascinating, and it's really interesting to, I have had a pretty solid meditation practice for 20 years. I practice what I preach. I teach meditation. I'm obviously an Ayurvedic practitioner, but still I find my hand reaching all by itself for the phone without any conscious control.
Sure.
And so over the past year, it's become really wow, this is we're just in the beginning of these things,
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this today, and so this piece I wrote is already published and out there, but it's there's a new feeling in human, in being a human, there's a new feeling of that wanting to check in.
Got it. Got it.
Right,
To
so-
always be.
Right, even if you don't have anything to do on the phone, you don't have a message to send, you don't have you have no whatever. You have nothing to do on the phone, but if it's been 20 minutes or an hour, you feel this compulsion to check in.
Almost like an alternate reality that.
And almost everybody feels that. And I was thinking about this today. I was like, 20 years ago, this didn't exist.
Yeah.
And it's in just this feeling, whether it can be analogous to craving or anxiety or maybe boredom or whatever feeling, but it's almost like this niche feeling that's arising. This it's like this need to see what's going on if I'm missing anything.
Yeah, like a FOMO sort of.
Like a FOMO thing. And so that's just like top of mind. But one thing I really, really, really encourage people to do is just to, if you do have, I don't want to call it a problem, but a certain habit. But actually, before I get to that, I'll just highlight that researching this piece was really interesting because all of like the clinical definitions of addiction, whether it's compulsion, continued use despite negative consequences, they're all applicable to everyone's phone use.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
So it's like the average person now will spend almost 4 hours a day on your phone. And even if you want to reduce your phone usage by 15-16%, then at the end of the year, you will have added 1 week of your whole, 1 week to your year.
That's
just
amazing.
by reducing your phone checks by 15-16%.
This is the thief of youth now.
Yeah.
Right? It's just taking away 4 hours a day, wow. Of which maybe 1 hour is work and the rest is.
It's crazy, man.
It's madness.
It's crazy. So one thing just like chewing your food that I recommend everybody do is that in the morning, stay in airplane mode. First of all, sleep in airplane mode.
Absolutely.
Don't sleep with your phone on. It actually disrupts your biology.
Yeah.
But to stay in airplane mode as long as you can. I have a 1 hour rule with myself.
Beautiful.
That's absolutely non-negotiable.
Beautiful. How beautiful.
And because, again, now it's like the science is there to back it up. It's that like the average human being, when they wake up, they're in the hypnopompic state for about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And this is like when our beta brainwaves aren't online yet. And we're kind of hyper suggestible. So like anything you look at is going to have an outsized emotional impact.
Yes. For sure.
And you get triggered, it's like you feel this, urge to just, reply right away.
Yeah.
But it's really like this sacred time that you can actually set your emotional agenda for the day and not have it set by incoming messages and calls. And if you can't do an hour, then you can do 15 minutes, 20 minutes, brush your teeth, do your thing in the bathroom, and then come back to it.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Michael. I'm sure our listeners will love that. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and if you could answer them in a sentence or so, just spontaneously. Yeah. So, biggest mistake you've made in the realm of sort of self-improvement, and so that's our topic, right? Whether it's Ayurveda, like anything. Biggest mistake you've made.
I think it's thinking that it's me that helps people or it's me that's teaching. It's like I practice primarily in 2 traditions, Ayurveda and then Buddhism for the most part. And when I teach meditation or I teach Ayurveda, none of this is me. It's like I didn't come up with this. I'm just like a radio. And like the less static I have, then the better the transmission, the better the song. So it's like I think this mistake that I made in the past is thinking that like Michael had a large part to play in either the teaching or the consultation, but in reality, I'm just like a filter. I'm like a transducer.
Yeah.
And for these incredibly vast and wise traditions that have persisted for thousands of years for a reason, because they're just incredibly useful to your daily life.
Sure. The second question is, what is the role of wisdom in society at large?
Oh
We're
God.
going through a challenging time and a lack of sort of inspiring leaders and so on. So, what is the role of wisdom in society at large?
Whew. That's an interesting one because I don't really see much wisdom out there. I mean, I see it in my own like algorithmic silos, like in the few social medias that I am on.
Yeah,
I see it kind of peter in and out.
yeah,
But in the larger, whether it's geopolitics or music or sports, or it's just not even in like the literature world, it's just not fashionable, which is crazy because it's like even that's what really hooked me with
Yeah.
literature is like
Yeah.
reading these early 20th century writers are very wise, and I learned a lot.
Yeah.
But in fiction and nowadays, it's not common.
It's not common. True.
And but what is the role of wisdom in the wider world? I mean, it certainly is a void
Sure.
that needs filling.
Sure.
Because even if you just look at like statesmen from the 20th century,
Absolutely.
Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, JFK,
Mandela.
wisdom, Mandela, wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nowadays, you don't see anything.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Scary.
Scary. You don't see any of it. So everybody kind of feels it, that there's a void.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
rough out there.
It's rough one. Michael, could you please let our listeners know how they can find out about your work, your website, the stuff that you do, and so on? And then I'll ask you one last question.
Okay. I'm most active on Substack, so Michael Green Ayurveda.
And it's GREENE. We'll also put it in the comments.
Okay, yeah, like the color.
Like the color.
No E.
No E.
So michaelgreenayurveda.substack.com. My website, michaelgreenayurveda.com.
Okay.
And I don't have Instagram or anything, so I'm kind of somewhat invisible, but
Sure.
Substack or the website, best way.
Are the best. Okay. Firstly, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. We've
Likewise.
known each other for a while, but to have this conversation has enriched what I know of you and the work that you do. I've seen it in bits, but this was very, very rewarding. Our listeners would love that as well. Big thanks to Usada for hosting this. I'm going to ask you to leave our listeners with some message as a way to close our discussion.
Like any message or
Anything.
anything that sort of comes
Anything.
through.
Yeah.
Oh man, how much time do I have?
How much ever you want.
So one thing that I think a lot about, especially in the past year, is that, and I talk a lot about, is that I think we all grew up in a cult
Okay.
where we have been hypnotized to outsourcing our health, mental and physical, to experts or outside sources.
Yeah.
Both the meditation world and Ayurveda, they help you reclaim your autonomy and your power, because both in Ayurveda and in the Buddhist system, the choices that you make are the root cause of either physical health or physical illness, mental health or mental illness. And the choices that we make, they don't exist in a vacuum, and they do not disappear into the past. They carry out ahead of us to meet us somewhere down the line. So the root cause in Ayurveda, there are 3 root causes of disease. One of them is essentially, roughly, could be translated to choices that we make.
Beautiful.
And so the choices that we make are what determines our fate, mental health, physical health, everything. And it is, for what I've seen, maybe you have something else, but it is our ability to be present in the moment that sets ourselves up for success for making more intelligent choices.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Presence frees.
Yes.
Well, Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I hope you've enjoyed this. We'll continue doing more. And we look forward to catching up again, maybe a panel discussion and so on and so forth.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
Manish. Thank you. Thank you.